Welcome back to Thirsty Thursdays with Noah and Blake. Hey Noah, how are we doing today, buddy?
Hey, dude, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Oh, it's been great. Being a supervisor and all, it makes beers taste so much better.
I
So,
have some fantastic news for you, Blake.
yes.
I made bread this morning,
Oh, really?
like sourdough bread. I mean, we're years after the COVID resurgence of sourdough starter, but yeah, I did it. And you know what? It tasted pretty gnarly.
So, what are we tasting? What are you drinking tonight?
I'm returning back to the fridge. I think I just bought maybe the largest 6 pack or 12 pack. I can't remember what of beer for humans because I've been trying to finish it for weeks now. What about you?
I went with a third wheel. It's St. Peter's, Missouri, at your wheelhouse. It's called Peanut Butter Porter Time Roast Porter. So,
Nice. That sounds really nice.
yes. We have a special guest today, don't we?
We sure do.
We got the Gnarly Gnome of Cincy Brewcast. Welcome on.
Oh, thank you guys. I'm super special.
You are. You are.
You are.
Super special.
You make me feel special.
Well, that's the goal every week.
Well, I appreciate it.
What you drinking on, Gnarly?
So, in typical fashion for me, I couldn't just do this from my home studio. I had to go to a brewery. So I tried to figure out which brewery I hadn't been to in the longest here in Cincinnati, and it was 13 Below. So I drove all the way out here to Sailor Park and went to 13 Below right as they opened their doors. And I'm sitting here at the bar, like literally at the bar, drinking their Oktoberfest, which is still on tap, called Prost. It's good. It's a fest beer. 4.2%, so it's like perfect like drinkability for this time of day. It's delicious.
Nice. Is that one of your favorite spots to go?
I don't get out here nearly enough because it's very far from my house.
Gotcha.
but I try to make it a couple times a year at least.
Nice.
So, how did you get into craft beer?
That's a good question, and I don't know that I really know the answer to it. I mean, I definitely remember kind of my first sips of beer. Like I think most people, they were from Grandpa. He had Miller Genuine Draft was his beer of choice. Had it always downstairs in his bar, and snuck a few sips there. And remember, just from day one, loving beer. I loved the taste of it. Everybody kind of made jokes about it. Oh, you're not going to like it. And I did. I liked it from day one. Loved it. In fact, when I grew up and started actually drinking with friends and things like that, it was always craft beer. It was always something that was different than the macro choices that were around. Luckily enough for me, living here in Cincinnati, we always had great beer. We always had craft beer around from at the age that I was at. So I was the weird guy going to college parties with a cooler behind me filled with growlers of Mount Carmel or things like that. It was just always craft beer. So I don't know where it actually started. It was just always there.
So, what was some of your first favorite ones when you started drinking?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Mount Carmel definitely was right there at the beginning. There was a little bar in Clifton. Well, not a little bar, a bar called Mac's Pizza Pub. It's still around. They always had a tap of Mount Carmel on, and it was the Copper Ale or Nut Brown. Their stout. Those beers were the beers that I drank kind of early on. As soon as you started figuring out that there was more out there, you just start exploring and start just diving into whatever you can get your hands on, whatever new flavors you can try, whatever new breweries you can try. I live next to or close to Jungle Gyms here in Cincinnati, so it was always
That
great
feels
craft
dangerous.
Beer. Yeah, there was not always not just like great craft beer close by. There were always people that were into craft beer close by, so you just always had those people ready to talk about craft beer and to help you show that next thing. So just from day one, just trying everything you could get your hands on.
So, do you think that Cincinnati is a good place to learn how to drink beer then? Sort of like you? Like, do you think it's like beginner friendly, or do you think this is like a craft beer, like not professional, but like you have to be really into craft beer to be a part of the scene?
No, I mean, you can definitely be into the scene no matter what, but it is definitely a unique city. There's weird things that are happening here in Cincinnati that aren't typical. You can walk into even now, there's right now there's two different Oktoberfest styles on. There is a Bach beer on. That's not a normal thing for a craft brewery. So when you walk in and you see that, you have to kind of understand why the personality of Cincinnati bleeds so heavily into these breweries. They're not normal spots in the bigger kind of picture of craft beer. We have this thing about us that you have to understand if you really want to appreciate what Cincinnati is. With that being said, that doesn't mean that there's not something that anybody can fall in love with here. If you walk in and you're a new drinker, there's something you'll enjoy. There's somebody that'll be more than happy to talk to you about craft beer, and I think that's true everywhere you go. And one of the unique things that I think about this city is just how prevalent craft beer is wherever you are. If you walk into any gas station, there's going to be great craft beer. If you walk in any restaurant, there's going to be great craft beer. It finds its way into every aspect of culture here in the city, and I think that's great for both sides, for new drinkers and old drinkers alike.
I definitely feel like for me, like being up in Troy, even though I don't really have it's growing here, but where I'm at, I'm like only an hour from Cincinnati, 30 minutes from Dayton, and an hour from Columbus. So I feel like I'm spoiled with that because I have so many
Yeah.
choices. I can decide one day I'm going to Columbus, one day I'm going to Cincinnati, and I think that's just been awesome and fun. But
I try.
Cincinnati, I swear there's one open up each and every time I come down here. So
Yeah, there's a lot of great beer here. There's a lot of great beer in Columbus. There's a lot of great beer in Dayton too. Like there's a lot of really cool things happening just in this pocket of the country that I think sometimes we forget is unique. Like it's not a normal thing that's happening in other parts of the country. Yeah, like West Coast has really cool breweries, but it's different because it's an older kind of craft beer market. It's still kind of scrappy and exciting and fun here, and then you've got like this really great heritage that's always been here, this German center of the country, one of the several kind of German centers of the country that you don't get that on the West Coast. Like that's you don't have that history to it, and I think that very much has laid a foundation for where we're going with craft beer,
For sure.
if
I
that makes
think I
sense.
think it's like that in Cincinnati, St. Louis, and probably Milwaukee. I think
Yep.
there was a story in the Covington Link NKY talking about the Germanic history of the region and how those three cities are very Germanic historically.
Yeah.
So I think that
And it's
you probably see that.
it's really laid this neat foundation for where craft beer can kind of grow on top of that didn't happen in some of these other places that maybe started first with their craft beer scene, but as time goes on, our scene, like, it goes deeper into the roots of who we are than what they ever can, in my opinion. And granted, I'm a little biased.
there's been a lot of reports that craft beer nationally and in Cincinnati still has breweries in the area opening. You think we're going in the right direction with more breweries open? I know that's the biggest debate right now. I feel like anywhere you read that we have too many here and there, and we can't support them all. And
We're in a weird time right now for craft beer, in that we are going to see more places close than we ever have, because we really haven't seen places close. We've seen a couple here and there, but up until now, most places that open were staying open. Now we're going to see some of those places kind of close and be replaced by different types of spots, but they will be replaced by something else. And I don't think we're even close to hitting some kind of bubble that people like to talk about. Like, I think it's ridiculous. I think that every single neighborhood bar that exists could be a brewery. Every restaurant that exists could be a brewery. Every social club that exists could be a brewery. Like, all of these things could exist as a brewery. And until all of them are, maybe then I would say that we're maxed out. But it'll never happen. We'll never hit that point. But what they look like will look very different in 10 years than what they looked like 10 years ago.
But did we go through this back in like '09 ish? Wasn't there like a little like a time where people were closing, and all of a sudden we came back with the big surgeons?
It was earlier than '09.
Okay.
It was like in the '90s. There were a few that opened up, but even that, well, you're talking like a handful of breweries in the city. And most of them were kind of chains or kind of brew pubby kind of places that they were different. It was, and there were a bunch that opened and then closed, and then a couple years later were replaced by this boom of what we're seeing now. We're not even scratching the surface of what the city can handle as far as beer goes.
No, you got anything?
Well, can we jump forward and talk a little bit about how you might not think this, but you've sort of become the voice of alcoholic, not alcoholic as in negatively, but of beer and spirits of Cincinnati with Cincy Brewcast and all the different things that you seemingly do every day.
Right.
How did you get into that?
Well, first off, I appreciate you calling me the voice, but the tagline of the show is the voice of Cincy Craft, of the Cincy Brewcast. We didn't talk about it a lot at the time, but when the guy started the show with Mike, when he came up with that tagline, it was never meant as us being this voice of anything. It was that the people that were on the show, the people that were talking about it, this was giving beer its own voice. And so I hold very, very tight to that it's never about me. It's about the people that I'm interviewing, or the stories that I'm writing about, or the people that are on my show. Without all of that, I'm just a guy sitting in my basement drinking beer, which is the same as all of us. Like I'm not the voice. I like to say that I'm the conduit for the voices of Cincy Craft, but I do appreciate it. But how did I get there? I just drank a lot, and and started talking about it. Started writing blogs about it, and
Well, you have a background
I
as a food photographer, right?
sort of.
Okay.
We'll say I have a background as a photographer.
Okay.
And that journey in itself has been a strange one to get to kind of where I am. My day job now is food and drink photographer, I guess, mostly drinks, which kind of makes sense when you really put two and two together. But it wasn't always that way. I started shooting pictures of people, weddings, portraits, that kind of thing. And during that period of my life was also into craft beer, and started kind of writing about craft beer a little bit just on my own personal kind of side, just stuff for me. And eventually just kind of started sharing it out, and people started reading it. And it just sort of happened. It was never like a planned thing, which is on one hand been a blessing that you can kind of let it develop its own personality over time. But on the other hand, it's been there's a lot of chaos that comes with that, because you're letting this thing kind of develop as you go, and you're just trying to kind of keep it on track and trying to figure out what it is as time goes. I don't know if that answers the question at all.
Well, so let's go back to
Sure.
the initial question, I guess. Like, what made you want to get into podcasting and video making and sort of sharing the news of blogging and all of that of the Cincinnati craft brew in alcohol area?
Yeah, I don't know that there's like an easy answer for that. So as far as like creating things, like that's just always been who I am. I'm always creating things. I'm always taking pictures. I was always writing. I've had blogs and websites for as far back as I can remember. As soon as we had the internet in our house, I was making some kind of a blog. We didn't know that's what it was called at the time, but just always had to make things and had to write about stuff that was important to me. Craft beer came later as I got older and discovered it, and it just became like this natural extension that, because I'm into this, I'm also going to start writing about this, and just started writing about it. I hadn't connected the two at that time, that the photography videography side of at that time was just photography. The photography side of my life could be brought in with the craft beer side. That didn't happen until way later than it should have. Like within the last several years, kind of figured out that the things that I was doing on the photography side of the day job could also be on the beer side. But the podcast, I was sitting at a bar and was getting ready to leave, but my wife was standing there waiting for me, tapping her foot, and there was a guy sitting at the bar as I was cashing out, and I had a hat on for another local brewery, and he said, "Oh, I've heard about that place. How is it?" And I said, "Oh, it's great." I was telling him about it, and I said, "It's, it's right down the street. You've never been there." And he's like, "No, we just usually come here." And I said, "Well, what part of town do you live in?" He's like, "We just, we live down the street." And I said, "Well, you live right there, and this place is just 15 minutes that way. Well, you got to go to all these places. You got to, try to get to all of these spots, and it's so close." And he's like, "That's, it's probably a good point." And we just kind of started talking about craft beer in the city. And he's like, "How do you know so much about craft beer in the city?" And I said, "Well, I'm kind of obsessed with it. I do this weird blog thing that I started up a couple years ago called the Gnarly Gnome." And he's like, "That's really cool." He's like, "I have this idea that I've been thinking about, and can I send you an email tomorrow?" And I said, "Sure." I gave my email address, and we exchanged info, and I left. And the next morning in my inbox was this like 2-page, I'm going to call it a manifesto of what Cincy Brewcast was. It was this kind of this news show with like this panel of newscasters sitting at this desk talking about all of the news of the week in craft beer, and it would cut to interviews, and it was this really cool kind of almost like a sports show. Like you watch some of these things that are on ESPN now. It was very similar to that, this idea. And he said, I really want to make this thing. It's a podcast. I've been hearing about podcasts, and I don't know how to do it. And I said, "Well, I think it's cool. We could probably figure it out." And he's like, "I also don't know how to get anybody to talk to us." And I said, "I think that part is probably easier than you think it is. You just go and you ask them to talk to you."
Yeah.
and you guys know that from your show. It's people.
It's journalism
make
101.
Yeah. They just go and ask them to talk to you. But we started it. We like literally days after that, we were sitting around his dining room or his kitchen table with a portable recorder sitting in the middle of the table, and 4 of us sitting there with coolers of beer sitting next to us, and we just started talking about what we brought and what we had been drinking and some of the things that we had heard that were happening in Cincinnati beer, and we recorded it. And the next day we put it out on SoundCloud. At the time, don't host your podcasts at SoundCloud. It's a terrible podcast host, but we did. And it just happened. And then I became a podcaster. It was never planned out. Nothing has ever been planned out with anything that I do until fairly recently. It's always been just something happens. It sounds like it'd be fun to try it. And so I try it, and it either works or it doesn't. And you just kind of, you make stuff.
Nice.
So what season are you on, and how many episodes have you done so far?
This is volume 9. We call them volumes on our show because Mike, when we started it, he said I wanted it to be like a comic book, volume whatever, episode whatever. So we just recorded this week, or we just released volume 9, episode 20. I don't know how many total episodes it is. We've been notoriously inconsistent some seasons, depending on what's going on, but we'll say 500-ish episodes, I guess, something around there.
Nice.
And then obviously the spin-off podcasts around that are part of it too.
Right.
What's your other spin-offs? I always forget about them. But.
Yeah, so Cincy Brewcast is what I call the heart of it all. It's the show where we go to breweries, talking to people that either work at the brewery, own the brewery, or drink at the brewery, talking about craft beer. I have a show called Drinking with the Gnome, which is where we talk more about wine and spirits and cocktails and bars and things like that. That show is not very consistent. And then we have the Weekly Pint, which is probably the most consistent of all of the shows, which started during COVID. We just did episode 200 of that. It's a weekly live show on Monday nights where we just talk about whatever is happening in our lives and in the Cincinnati drink scene.
Is that live on Facebook or Instagram?
Facebook, YouTube, and I guess Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
No, I've been in on some of your weekly pints, and they're always a fun time if
Yeah,
I stay awake long enough.
they're a little more freeform than Cincy Brewcast. They are also late at night sometimes. I usually start about 9:30 because I have two small kids, so I try to make it at a time where I know the world is going to be calmed down enough that I can head down to the studio and make the show happen.
One thing I've always been curious on, and I enjoy it, was when you do your Oktoberfest quest. It
Yes.
seems like a fun but challenging time. I know I did the Christmas beer thing, the Advent calendar, and that I could only imagine what you went through each and every year.
It's a blast. So I take every packaged Cincinnati Oktoberfest beer and run them through a bracket, kind of like March Madness, to find out at the end which one is the best Cincinnati Oktoberfest beer. And then for the first time this year, I then saved a can of each of them to cuvee at the end into one giant boot of Oktoberfest that is the perfect Cincinnati Oktoberfest beer because it's all of them combined into one. And I mixed that and drank that live on Weekly Pint. It's a lot of fun. Again, it just kind of started happening. I started drinking a bunch of Oktoberfest beer and started kind of comparing them. And several years ago, I thought it'd be fun to just try them all because that wasn't that crazy. This year there were 36 of them. So it's now a little bit harder to get them all. It's way more expensive to get them all because I do buy them all, and a little more complicated storing them all. And the bracket gets very confusing when you're trying to figure out an Oktoberfest beer that's released in July versus an Oktoberfest beer that's being released at the beginning of October. How you figure that bracket out, it's complicated, but it's good. It's fun.
I know you're a big fan of Bach. Have you ever thought about trying that one out, or you're leaving that alone?
I have thought about it, and it's never going to happen. It's too much. I'll stick with the Oktoberfest. There aren't as many packaged Bach beers. There are plenty that are on tap, and I can't make it to all of the tap rooms and get crowlers of them. I can't do that, so it would be very. It wouldn't be as exciting with 4 or 5 different packaged Bach beers in a bracket. That's half the fun of the Oktoberfest is that there are so many, and it just kind of gets overwhelming. That's the fun.
But I think as people near Cincinnati, I think we're spoiled on when it comes to Oktoberfest and Bach because there's so many good beers like that. I mean, beers in general in Cincinnati are good, but like some of these, like Germans, I know when we were talking how we crush them. Even though I've never been to Germany, so I don't know how close we are to them, but I can only tell.
Especially when you look at Bach beer. We'll take Oktoberfest first. When you go to Oktoberfest in Munich, there's a handful of beers on tap. Or we'll say breweries. There's a handful of breweries on tap. I have not.
Oh, okay.
But you're talking about I think it's 6 different breweries that you can get their beer at Oktoberfest, and they're all in different tents. Like you can't just go and sit and drink one and then drink the other one. Like you have to drink one and then get in another tent to get another one, that's not easy because you can't just go walk into a tent and grab a beer. You have to have a seat and you have to reserve a table, and it's different. it's great, but it's different. You come here, you can come down to Oktoberfest Cincinnati. You can walk down the street. You can walk a half a block, chug your Oktoberfest, grab one from Germany, drink that one, walk another half a block, chug that one, grab one from a brewery up in Mason, then grab one from a brewery down in Covington, and just it's all right there. And then when we start talking about Bachfest, there is no place in the world that you can get as many Bach beers in one spot as you can at Bachfest that I know of, and somebody can feel free to correct me if they want to send emails. Send them to, well, I won't give my wife's email. I was going to send my wife, but if you want to send your complaints.
Rumpke.com.
Send your complaints to truthbeerpod@gmail.com. But as far as I know, there is no place in the world that you can get as many Bach beers as you can at Bachfest in Cincinnati. That's crazy. That's a weird thing that we do, and it's fun, and it's it becomes part of this culture and this thing that no, we're not Germany, and Germany has this brewing history, and they've done incredible things for beer and beer science. But we've taken this thing to a whole new level here in Cincinnati, and I think that I think it's the best place to drink beer in the world, personally.
And now we have what's called Link Fest with Urban Artifact. You think that's going to
Yeah.
grow into the next big thing?
Yeah, Missing Link is another really strange thing that we're doing here in Cincinnati. You know, they're Urban Artifact. When they started out, a lot of what they were doing was finding wild yeast and brewing with wild yeast and things like that. And not so much anymore. They've kind of shifted into fruit beers, but also awesome. But
Totally.
when they were kind of going through this thing, they discovered this, or a friend of the brewery helped discover a lagering tunnel here in Cincinnati that had an intact vessel inside it, which is a really rare thing. You don't see that ever. And the guys from Urban Artifact came in and swabbed everything and just hoping to find some kind of old dormant yeast, and somehow managed to find, they found a lot of yeast cells. Most of them tasted like garbage. One of them actually tasted good, and they sent it off to the lab and they had it analyzed, and it had never been seen before. And it was definitely a brewer's yeast. And so they made a beer with it. It was so cool that they donated that yeast to the city of Cincinnati, made it so that anybody could order that yeast from, I want to say Omega. I could be wrong on that. Just Google Missing Link and you can find the yeast. But and then started throwing this festival around it where they want every brewery in the city to make a beer with this yeast, make something weird, make something different, make a lager, make a saison, make a fruited beer, whatever you want it to be, make something with this yeast. And they put them all on tap, and everybody hangs out and drinks them and eats a bunch of good food. And they have a Sasquatch calling contest, and it's a little weirder than Oktoberfest is. It's kind of like a spectrum. So Oktoberfest is a very normal German style beer festival here in Cincinnati. And then you have Bachfest that takes some of the things from Oktoberfest and kind of smashes them with Mardi Gras and some of that kind of experience. And then you have Missing Link that kind of takes that and then adds like aliens and Bigfoot and all kinds of weird, wild things into it. So it's just a spectrum of festivals.
So now the big question: when's our fourth one? Kidding.
Yeah, I mean, what do you do? What is the fourth one?
I know.
There definitely are different seasons in the city, and we've got in the fall you have Oktoberfest season. In the spring we have Bachfest. In the summer we have Missing Link. So maybe in the winter there's some room for something to happen. Maybe like a Schwarzbier
Maybe
festival.
Dark Charge has to sort of figure out a way to make itself a festival.
It's definitely a festival. It's just not a city encompassing festival.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah.
But could you imagine a barrel aged festival? I would definitely be staying in a hotel that night.
Yeah, well, a hotel or a toilet bowl, one or the other.
Probably both of them.
Yes.
Because I had that lesson learned my first time at Oktoberfest.
Yeah, if you've never been to a beer festival and then spent the night on the bathroom floor, you haven't really experienced life.
Well, so last time we had one of these Thirsty Thursday conversations, we spoke with Marco of Truth Beer Podcast, and we were talking about the wild number of Cincinnati beer media that we have. Yeah. What's your take on that? I mean, like, you have to be pretty excited that there are so many people, or are you sort of like, I can't believe there's so much competition? I'm sure it's not that.
There's no such thing as competition in this, especially when you're talking about creating things. It just, the more people that are creating things, the better the world gets. It was, again, kind of always that way in Cincinnati. When I started my blog, there were more people blogging about beer in the city than there were breweries making beer in the city, which was kind of a crazy thing. Yeah. And it then tapered off for a couple years, and now it's picking back up to where there's people, especially you start throwing just Instagrammers and things like that. There's a ton of really great people that are making good content about beer and restaurants and bars in the city, and they're just doing it on Instagram. I think that there's so much room for people to create stuff, and I love especially the podcasting side. I think podcasting is very near and dear to my heart because I've been doing it for so long at this point that I love seeing people put themselves out there and trying to get out there and interview people and make content that features other people more than just themselves. Mm-hmm. I think that's important to me.
I definitely know the first time that Noah dragged me out to Mad Street, I know I was, but the more I do it, the more I've learned to enjoy it,
Mm.
and it's just becoming like second nature, and I just
Yeah,
want to keep doing it.
yeah, it's addicting.
Especially with what we do with going to breweries, it's always a fun time.
Yeah, yeah, you get to meet a lot of people that you wouldn't meet otherwise. You get to get a good picture, kind of what makes a place what it is. And as time goes on and you start interviewing people that maybe were here at the beginning that move on to something else, and then you interview somebody else that comes into that role, and then you've got this person over here that you used to know from here, and you interview them over here, and you start to see how the personalities develop the personalities, if that makes sense. The personality of a space is influenced by the people that are there. And as you start seeing some of that mixing happen, and you start to kind of follow along with those stories by creating podcasts, it's fun. It gives you more of a maybe more of an appreciation of what a space is than otherwise.
Yeah, totally.
So, what's next for the Cincinnati beer scene, you think?
Mm. What's next? I mean, just you're definitely going to see more breweries. there's a lot more places that are on the horizon that are getting ready to open up. We went from people understand that you need something other than just beer. You can't just open up and have great beer. You have to have some kind of hook. But people are starting to figure out that the experience of just drinking beer can be your hook. You can have a great beer garden that I think people kind of latch onto, that can be your thing. And creating a space that people want to be at is more important now than it ever was before. So we're going to see places with really great spaces, be it beer gardens or indoor beer halls. We don't have for as German as the city is, like, we still don't have a lot of great German beer halls or German beer gardens. I think we're going to start seeing some of that, and we're going to start seeing people kind of uh, playing homage to that culture that maybe for a while we forgot about. I think we're going to see that, but more
Because
beer, and more places.
one trend I noticed for a little bit, I think it died a little bit, was these breweries that were going to be like brew distills. I know the place near Rheingeist is still doing theirs, but do you think that's a dead project, or what do
Not
you think?
dead, no, no. There, you'll see places like that, but it's hard to focus on all of that at the same time. So yeah, I mean, they're doing great on both sides of the spectrum. Their beer is better than it's ever been. Spirits are better than they've ever been. March 1st has both sides of that, brewing and distilling. Karrakin has brewing and distilling. I know I'm forgetting one or two places that also do. Like, you're going to see that, and you'll see places that open up with both. But the spirits industry is very strange to try to break into, and to try to get your spirits to compete with. I mean, if you're going to make a vodka, how do you get somebody to carry your vodka over Tito's? It's just it's just not going to happen.
No.
So it's a hard world to break into right now. But if you've got a great taproom space, and uh, people are coming in there wanting to drink booze, you should be making it yourself, is the way I think of it. So we'll see more of that, but still a beer city first and foremost.
Yes. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. Where can people find you?
They can find me usually bellied up at a bar, right? Now, you can go to the gnarlygnome.com. Everything is there. You can get to all of the stuff I do from there somewhere. But yeah, just get online and search for the Gnarly Gnome drink, and you'll find me.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure for you joining us tonight. I think we had a real lot of fun, and we also thank you for the time when we've only had like 3 or 4 episodes on. You had us come down
Of
on
course.
yours, so that was a fun time, and definitely learned a lot that day. So, and you
That's
so much for Cincinnati Craft, and I've always been a huge fan of you.
Well, I appreciate that. Keep up the good work with what you guys are doing. This first season of your show was fantastic, and season 2 already started out incredibly. So I'm looking forward to see where it goes. So
Yeah.
just keep up the good work.
This coming week is really exciting. Well, not this coming week, but this coming episode is really exciting. We have 2 things. Number one, we spoke with a cicerone in Kent, England, and
Wow.
she taught us how to properly taste beer, which is really exciting. And we also are getting a brand new logo for our podcast, which is really exciting.
Excellent. I can remember the day when we got our first Big Boy logo.
Yeah, it is cool, man.
Awesome.
It is
That's
cool.
awesome.
Yeah.
And
I
get to
love seeing
finally
you guys
do,
grow.
and we finally get to do my friends at Alomatic coming up too.
Yes.
So that's gonna be fun. So
I still have never made it up to Alematic, and it's definitely on my short list the next time I'm up there in Dayton.
Well, if you're free on Sunday, you can come and take my place, and I'll sit quietly and produce.
Sundays are family days. My family would kill me.
Well, then maybe not. Oh well, we tried.
Yeah, I'll make it up there at some point.
Sounds good. All right. Later.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.